2 of almost every screenplay ends with this sequence. The world falls apart around your hero, then a new hope leads to a midpoint triumph that turns out to be a false victory. Then the bad guys close in. There's this all is lost moment, then a dark night of the soul. Then a big surprise launches you into Act 3, where your story wraps up. In the big, long, epic love story the Bible tells, that sequence is the Easter season. Palm Sunday was our midpoint triumph that turns out to be a false victory. The bad guys close in on Holy Thursday. All is lost on a Good Friday crucifixion. And our dark night of the soul begins with Mary's broken heart at the foot of the cross. Mary's rage was hopeless and fierce. She wiped it from her face onto a sleeve now dank with mucus, blood, sweat, and tears. A drop of blood fell to a stone at the foot of the cross, and she scrambled to wipe it up. This did not seem real. She had watched those Roman terrorists torture him all day long, but still it didn't seem like this could have happened to her son. But she looked up to confirm, and it was him, and he was dead, and this was the only life she would ever leave, and time was irreversible, and the corners of her mouth drew thin and tense with heartache as big as the world. Saliva fell from her mouth as she cried. She resisted an urge to prove this wasn't a dream by smashing her head on a rock. Then she saw a drop of blood on a stone she had missed. It had already been blackened by time. A fly lapped up whatever good there was in it and flew on to red her feasts on Jesus' feet. As long as she had lived, Mary had been able to touch him, but now the empire wouldn't let her. A little black fly pranced its shit-stained feet, contaminating the sole of a foot Mary used to kiss, his tiny little toes twinkling in front of her nose. She longed to touch him, to grab his hand, those hands. She was so proud when they first held a hammer and he followed his father into the world of masculine labor. Now his hands hung, limp, bleeding at the wrists, flayed by dark metal nails. Never again would those hands heal someone who was suffering. And for what? Because he had the courage to love? That was all he ever did. Whatever else anyone thought of him, nobody denied he was love. He forgave the evil men who nailed him to the cross while they murdered him. Now Mary was trapped alone in this evil world where it all went down. God had made a fool of her. She was just a little girl when she saw that angel. No chief priest or Pharisee would ever consider how scared she was when she learned that the law of Moses said her townsmen could stone her to death for what had happened inside her. What about little girls who got raped? You think that never happened under occupation? Did God want those girls stoned to death? Mary's only consolation was that angel. She had experienced that angel so deeply within, it seemed more, not less real than ordinary life. He said the baby in her womb was the son of the Most High God, destined to inherit the throne of David, but no angel of God would have led her to this. She'd been duped. God had strung her along, letting her think her son was something special, teaching those rabbis in Jerusalem. Damn it, what she wouldn't give to grab his little obstinate wrist and lead him away from danger, away from those men who would have stoned her to death for the miracle happening inside her womb, the same kind of men who killed her son for having the courage to love. Mary would never be free of the sound of his flesh tearing as he gasped for his final breath. Flesh she had once nibbled, kissed, clean, carried, and squeezed, then gradually let go of, only to find out she had never let go at all. His death was her death, too. Mary would live in the shadow of that cross until the happy day when flies finally lay eggs in her corpse. God had nothing to say through visions and dreams. It was stupid to have ever trusted that vision that could only have happened in her head. Mary knew that brains malfunction. Her own family thought Jesus was insane back when he was gathering his disciples. He's out of his mind, they said, and they followed him from Nazareth to Capernaum to take charge of him if he started talking crazy. He's possessed by Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, the teachers of the law who had come out from Jerusalem said. Maybe they were right. There were flies lapping at his wounds right now, buzzing with darkness accrued through ages of feasts on the blood of firstborn boys sacrificed to Baal. Now God was just another god like that, demanding human sacrifice. It could have been Beelzebub's flies buzzing in Mary's head that made her think she'd seen angels in the first place. Those swarming flies snuffed out whatever little light was left in her heart. She would not have minded one bit to see those Roman statesmen and Jewish priests torn limb from limb and eaten by flies. Mary's abdomen pounded as she sobbed, as though being pelted by stones. She may as well have let them stone her to death as a girl, may as well have slipped into the dark and empty void before God had a chance to trick her with such high hopes, only to dash them on a Roman cross. She should have only ever trusted real things, things men trust, things that could crush and be crushed. Swords, spears, nails, bones, and stones. That was what she got for imagining dreams mattered. This is what Jesus got for envisioning a God as their king. God did not rule this world. Men did, and they were not like Mary, and they were definitely not like Jesus. Death was all they wanted, and they would always get it because they're weak. It takes strength to love, and strength and love just lead to the cross. Mary's only consolation now would be to dignify her son's decomposition by wrapping him in a burial cloth. If Beelzebub's flies had not eclipsed her capacity to dream, she might have imagined wrapping him in a cocoon like Egypt's Isis did for Osiris. Oh, for such fairy tales to be real, that she could turn into a bird, flutter over her son's mummified body, and have him return, if even just for a moment. But these fantasies are lies. God had shown her on that cross that he had no special plan for her. A Roman guard jammed his cold steel sword between Jesus' ribs. Mary watched deep, red blood flow from his pierced, sweet heart, and with it, water. Now, Mary had listened to her people's stories all her life. In her mind's eye, she had seen Scripture scenes of water reflecting God's love. She'd seen the Spirit of God reflected over the surface of the deep. She'd seen God's reflection in a parted sea and the healing Jordan. With her own 2 eyes, she had seen water turn to wine and intoxicate, but it did not occur to her that this water flowing from her son's heart could somehow reflect God's love. What love? There were no deeper meanings to these things. There was nothing beyond the surface of the deep but a dark and empty void, just like the Scriptures said before we imagined everything else. God could no longer be trusted for protection, and the Scriptures could no longer be trusted for guidance. They were what got us into this mess. The Scriptures had said the Messiah would be a descendant of Abraham and Isaac, from the house of David, born in Bethlehem. They said he would be announced by Elijah, and he would come humbly riding on a donkey to claim his crown. Jesus was all these things, and now he's dead. His followers were a duped people with a crucified king. They should have known God was not on their side the moment Herod killed John. They had endured all those nightmares of John's severed head, and now Jesus' corpse on the cross joined them, and they were probably next. The disciples did not discuss passing Jesus' authority on like zealots did when their leaders were killed. His brother James didn't want it, nor did his beloved John, nor did Peter. Nobody wanted his crown of thorns. Love had no power to rule. The only power this tradition ever had were the prophets, these uncredentialed poets who speak truth to power. Where's the power in that? Tomorrow's Black Saturday, and all you need to know for that is that Jesus is dead. Don't candy coat this thing for yourself. He's dead.